Today we're talking with Kathryn Sullivan, and she is going to talk about her two books, one of which is a fantasy book and the other which is a collection of science fiction and fantasy short stories. So Kathryn, start with one of your books and tell us all about it.
Oh, okay. Well, the first book is Crystal Throne. It's a young adult fantasy. First version of it I wrote back when I was about 14, and I've been studying it out, getting rejected, and finally got it published in December 2000. And it won an award right after that, an Epi for the best fantasy from the Electronic Published Authors Association called Epic. And also came out in 2003 is my collection of short stories, both young adult fantasy and science fiction, Agents and Adepts. It was a finalist for an Epi for Best Anthology. Didn't win this year, but
let's start with the Crystal Throne. Tell us the basic plot. What's it about? Is it set in a fantasy world? Is it set on Earth?
Well, it starts off on Earth. There's two 12-year-olds who their assignment is to write something about the haunted tree in the nearby forest. Jeannie Tucker reads fantasy, and Peter Burns does not read fantasy. He doesn't believe in magic, and also he's going out to explore the haunted tree as if it's biology. What is this with the haunted tree? And before they realize it, they get pulled into the haunted tree and into a magical world where they're asked to break a curse. Now, Jeannie, of course, reading fantasy, recognizes elves and wizards right away, and she believes this whole thing. And Peter's, forget this, these people are crazy, let's go home. But they can't leave until they actually break the curse. So along the way, you encounter elves, you encounter witches who set the curse in the first place, you encounter fleet ones who are huge horse-like beings. And it just goes on.
Is there any central message? Is there any central message to the book?
Don't believe everything you see. Don't distrust everything you see, too, because one of the reasons Peter doesn't understand the horse-like beings is that he's a scientist in a way. I mean, I guess he's 12 years old, but he doesn't believe in the fact that horses can talk. Horses can't talk. So throughout most of the book, he can't understand what they're saying. While I was trying to find a market for the Crystal Throne, I kept writing other short stories based in the universe where some of my other characters came from, and that's where they evolved, and they were published elsewhere. And that's where the stories for Agents and Adepts came from.
Now, Agents and Adepts then is set in the same universe as the Crystal Throne?
Some of the short stories are. Some of them are set in the science fiction world that I've also got established. So for some of the stories in Agents and Adepts, I've got stories set in the dark history of the Crystal Throne when humans were still inhabiting the world, or when some of the fleet ones met the elves, how they paired up, and some of the science fiction stories. Some of them are standalone stories, some of them are ones where I have intergalactic agents, and some of those start off with Earth and then they go off into outer space.
Tell us, you mentioned that humans used to be in the universe of the Crystal Throne. What happened to them?
Well, there was this huge war, and the humans didn't like the fact that the elves didn't want to teach them magic. And some of them retreated back through the we call it the haunted tree, but they're also called the Watcher of Gates. Other ones stayed behind, and those who stayed behind were massacred. So the only humans left in the world at the time of the Crystal Throne are the wizards who used to be human at one time. So when Peter and Jeannie first step into the world, you have a lot of beings going, humans, oh my gosh, there's humans back in the world.
So there's a lot of magic in there.
Yes, the Crystal Throne, yes.
And the standalone science fiction stories. Tell us about some of them.
Some of them are very short. I have one story where we have a telepath in a time period where she thinks she's the only telepath on Earth, and she's not understanding where she gained the powers. And she's contacted by somebody else. So part of the story, she's trying to figure out where this telepathic voices come from. And that's the whole point of the story. So the other ones are set in my Interstellar Agents story, where one short story is basically her being contacted by an outer space agency, recruiting her to help protect Earth from some of the League's worlds who tend to like play God on other planets. And the next story in that series is her testing whether or not she can actually be undercover in an alien world and not be detected. And then the third story in that series is when her twin is being brought into this because Janice suddenly vanishes and the agency can't find her, but her twin realizes there's something wrong with her. And that one's called The Twin Bond.
Were these published in science fiction magazines, or were they just first published in the collection?
They were first published in semi-pro zines. One was published in the Minnesota's Fancy Review. Another one was published in Fury. And those are semi-professional magazines. A couple of them were published in fanzines. And of course, they're extensively reworked to get into this collection.
Were all the stories in the short story collection, were they all previously published, or were some of them just written for that collection especially?
There were at least two that were written that I just never found a home for, and they ended up in the collection because they had, well, one of them was Smoke stories. She's one of the younger version of one of the wizards from the Crystal Throne, and her adventures when she first starts using her powers. And I'm blanking on the other one. But there's 16 stories in Agents of the Adepts. Two of them were never published before. One of them was in my Meet Mistdaughter series, and it just never found a home after a couple of the zines who had asked for it folded. Meet Mistdaughter is in the Free Trader universe in the Crystal Throne world, back when the humans were still in the world. And she is a trader. She travels between the human kingdoms. She's one of those people who still has a friendly relationship with the elves. And all of a sudden, the first story in the series, she discovers in the middle of an ogre battle, she falls across a branch and no weapon, so she's using it as a quarterstaff. And all of a sudden, it turns into this polished white wooden thing. And this was just a branch that fell off a tree. Turns out it's a wizard who's trying to find apprentices, and he's decided that Mead would be a wonderful apprentice. And throughout most of the story, she's going, I don't want to be an apprentice, I don't want magic, go away. And he keeps saying, oh, you've got to find me, you've got to solve this riddle, and you're going to make a wonderful apprentice.
Oh, that sounds very interesting.